Divorce, well, divorce does a lot of things, including resetting your entire financial situation. But it doesn't have to define your financial future. In fact, many times, not only does divorce resolve all the other emotional issues within the relationship and the family, but it can also provide a financial freedom if handled and understood correctly. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Gavels Down, Voices Up, where we flip the script on conventional legal discussions. I'm Rachel King, here to guide you through the murky waters of family law, estate conflicts, inheritance disputes, all of the dramas. We're not just talking about law, we're talking about how it affects your life, your rights, your future, and your money. From the courtroom to your living room, we bring you insights that matter. Dive into each episode ready to challenge, learn, and grow. Ready to change the dialogue? Let's begin. Gavels down, voices up. Every time I have a client walk into my office and talk about how they're going through a divorce or they are thinking about divorce, one of the very first things I talk about is financial independence and the financial change that is about to face my client. Because the bottom line is that when we're talking about divorce, we're talking about taking one amount of money. That could be your income, your spouse's income, or two incomes together. But anyway, you have this one collective amount of money that's supporting one household and lifestyle. And now through the process of divorce, we're dividing it. And that same amount of money has to go to split two households. So while it's true that in making support orders and handling financials, the court does try and allow each party to maintain as close to a marital standard of living as possible, one of the things I say and I strongly encourage is for everybody to realize that's not financially possible. You can't take 100% of something to support one and now have that same 100% of something support two and have it be equivalent. So understanding how financial independence works and being prepared for it can really help you get through your divorce and be more successful financially on the other side of it. And it all starts with gaining employment. Maybe that's an obvious one, but when you're in a marriage, you make so many decisions financially and on your family that have an impact on employment. It might be your situation where you stayed home or other parties stayed home, your spouse stayed home, or maybe you both worked part-time or one worked part-time and one worked full-time. Who knows what the financial situation was in your marriage, but you made them as a couple based on what was going on in your family. Kids, jobs, travel, whatever the case may be. And now we have to look and see how those marital decisions affected ongoing employment and what that looks like. Financial independence starts 100% of the time with employment. And that can be really hard for people to understand, especially if they were the one that chose to stay home and to raise the family and to be the stay-at-home spouse. Maybe they put their career on hold for their spouse's career. Again, a marital decision, but what are they to do? What are you to do when you find yourself in a marriage that's over, even if it's your choice, but definitely if it's other spouse's choice, and you're like, I don't have a job, I don't have any skills, I feel completely destitute. It all starts with employment. So today we're going to talk about how to rebuild financial independence so that on the other side of divorce, you have some tools, some tricks. And actually, why wait till the end of divorce? Let's get started on them right at the beginning. The sooner, the better. So financially speaking, when we're talking about a divorce, we're talking about not just employment income, but we're also talking about assets, all of your assets, all of your debts, and then income. How is the income going to be split between the parties and for how long? Is one spouse entitled to support or maybe not? How are the assets that you've acquired going to be allocated? Or maybe you have assets, but you don't have a right to them. And then all of these debts. Because as I've said before, the debts that are accrued during the marriage, even if they're not in your name, are the responsibility of both of you. You didn't like that your husband went out and bought a car or your wife went out and bought a Louis Vuitton purse. Oh, well, you accepted that as part of the marriage. And even if it's financed on credit cards or on loans, you're still on the hook for half of it. And sure, the asset itself is part of the marriage too, but many times the assets are either not in existence because the money was used for groceries or a trip or something non-tangible, or the tangible asset actually depreciates, like in cars. So when we're talking about how to be financially independent in a divorce, let's first take each of these individually. First, we're going to talk about debts. And like I just said, no matter what the debt, however the debt is titled, it's still going to be equally divided. But your financial health post-divorce really starts with how we're going to allocate those debts. Why? Because if you don't allocate them or consider how they're going to be split, your credit can be screwed. For example, let's say the credit card is in your name, but it's a marital debt. So your husband, we're going to say husband because I'm wife, so it's easier for me to talk about husband and wife that way, but you can be whoever you want to be in this scenario. So credit card's in my name. We racked it up with a whole bunch of debt while we were married. Now we're going to get divorced. The $20,000 credit card, sure, my husband is on the hook for $10,000 of it, but if he doesn't pay it, it's not affecting his credit, it's affecting my credit. Right? So how I want that debt to be allocated is really important because my financial health in the future depends on my credit and how I've handled debts, making sure I can pay them. So while he's responsible for half of it, maybe I don't want to give him the power or the authority or the responsibility, for that matter, to pay the $10,000 on the credit card. So here's some things that we can do. We can say, well, that house, that other marital asset that we're going to get rid of, all of the community debt is going to be paid off. So the entire $20,000 credit card is going to be paid from the proceeds of the sale of the house. You each get to split the proceeds of the sale of the house. So if you pay it out of those, you're still paying half. Another thing that I've done for clients is say, yeah, the credit card's in my name, so I'm going to take all $20,000 of it, and I'm going to be responsible for paying all $20,000. Why? Because I want my credit to be maintained, but you're really on the hook for 10 grand of it. So I'm going to go ahead and take $10,000 of assets from somewhere else. Maybe I take $10,000 cash from the bank. So it ends up equalizing out, but I've maintained my financial stability, taken control of an asset that's going to affect my long-term financial state, and I've allocated it that way. So that's one thing that can be done. Another is, and one of the really huge issues is, well, we have a car and the car is in husband's, the loan is in husband's name, but it's my car. So I want to be allocated the car, but the loan is in husband's name. How do we do that? And how do we work it? It's easy if you can, again, pay off the debt. So then it's non-existent. That way husband doesn't have to worry about whether the car payment is going to be paid and if I'm going to pay it or not. But there's other things that can be considered too. Maybe you switch cars. Maybe you liquidate everything if one person can't refi it. For example, if I'm a stay-at-home mom and the car is in my husband's, the loan is for the car is in my husband's name, that would make sense because he's the employed person. I need a car, so I'm going to be awarded that car in the divorce, and he's on board with that, but I can't refi it because I don't have a job right now. Well, we'll fast forward in a little bit as to why employment is really important, and this is one of those times, but also knowing that and knowing that I'm now getting myself into an obligation, an encumbrance, a debt might have me reevaluate that. Maybe I don't want the brand new, Tahoe or Yukon or whatever the car is that I have. Maybe I say, you know what, let's get rid of that one and I'll take the less expensive vehicle or the car that's paid off in the divorce. So as we're figuring out how we're going to be moving forward in the divorce, oftentimes we focus on the assets division and the support division. I'm saying start with the debts, because once you understand the debts and how they're going to be allocated, you can make a decision on what is going to happen for the property division. Again, maybe you don't want the everyday driver that you've been using throughout the marriage because you can't afford it. Maybe that house that you want to live in, which is also an asset, but it has a huge mortgage debt on it that I might be responsible for if I take over the house, and I can't be. Maybe I can't refinance it. So I'm going to be considering all of that as I decide how I'm going to handle the asset split. I don't want to handle the asset split. I don't want to argue and push and do all of this to try and get the house and the car if I can't afford the house and the car to begin with. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I once had a case where this was, I was involved a day late and a dollar short. But prior to engaging me, husband and wife had entered into a marriage settlement agreement where they would both be responsible for half of the student loans of each other. That is really unique because typically student loans are separate property and you're responsible for them. But the couple decided that because of everything that had happened during the marriage and where they were both going to pay equally for the student loans of each other. Well, wife went in and immediately cut a check for her half of husband's student loans. I think her share was like $10,000. She used some of the money that she got from the proceeds of the sale of house and just gave it to him, paid it off, paid her half of his off. Husband was not quite as willing to do so. So she didn't think anything of it really. He said, don't worry, I'll pay. Well, that was all fine and dandy until she finally called me and said, my credit is destroyed. I can't get loans. I want to buy a house. I can't get a loan because my student loans are in default. I can't afford this. She had paid, when she paid her half of husband's student loan, she had also paid her half that she was required to pay of her student loans. So the only thing that was left were these student loans that husband had agreed to pay for her. But of course, they're in her name, her social security number, they're hers. And you can't really write to the government or to your debt processor and say, yeah, but my husband said that he was going to pay it for, so leave it alone. They say, no, we're in contract with you. You're on the hook. Husband paid for a little bit of time, a couple of years, and then didn't pay anymore. And she got in so much trouble. Everything that you could happen, happened. And she called me and she said, can you fix this? Can we force him to pay? Well, of course, we went through the court process. It was a lot more time, a lot more money. But the bottom line is that she was devastated from a financial perspective just because of how the debts were allocated. It would have been better to have one of the alternate options, hindsight's always 20/20, to say, look, you take your student loans, I'm going to take my student loans. Mine might be a little bit higher, but at least I'm going to be in control of them. Or, hey, we both should be responsible for the student loans. Let's pay it right out of the escrow from the house. So many things could have been done so that wife was in charge of making sure that her student loans got paid. Husband was in charge of making sure his did. And neither one was relying on the other. Because after divorce, chances are you're not going to have that same loyalty to your ex that you do maybe hopefully during the marriage, and even sort of during the divorce process when you're trying to keep everything as amicable as possible. Another case that I had that was pretty interesting also from a debt perspective is I had a husband who owned a large ranch in Northern California, and the ranch was beautiful. Wife had a business that she used from home. She worked from home, but she contributed financially a huge amount to the overall cost, at least equally, right? So both of them contributed financially to the marital residence and the marital lifestyle. And quite frankly, even though they both did pretty well, neither one could carry this on their own. There just wasn't enough money. Husband, as we're going through the divorce process, tells me I always like to find the deal breaker. What is the deal breaker that my client is just not going to budge on, right? What is my client willing to die on the sort of? So in this case, husband said, I want my ranch. I want the ranch. I want the ranch. I want the ranch. I want the ranch. I don't care about anything else, but the ranch is part of my livelihood. I'm taking it. And I said, okay, can you afford the ranch? And he said, I think so. So it did turn out that he probably could have afforded the buyout of wife's share in order to get the asset himself. We probably could have allocated it out. That was not the issue. The issue was the debt of running that ranch, between the ranch and all of the things that had gone into this lifestyle, which is what he meant when he said he wanted the ranch. He didn't just want the ranch. He wanted the workers. He wanted all of the bells and whistles that this property came with. He couldn't afford it. And it took quite a while, about 1.5 years of intense litigation trying to fight this, for him to finally say, oh my God, I can't afford the everyday upkeep and debt that this ranch has. We have to sell it. Yes. And if you'd known that and considered that from a non-emotional perspective at the outset, think about how much time, energy, and quite frankly, money could have been avoided. So as you're looking at the debt, don't just look at how much it is, but look at how much realistically you can afford to take on of it. And if you can't afford to take on some of it, be open-minded, getting rid of that debt or that asset. Maybe don't fight so hard for the asset. And at the same time, like we learned with the first story, if the credit is in your name, man, control how it gets paid, because it can have long-term effects on your financial health. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at how we can be financially healthy after divorce, given that we just went to our entire financial setup as it was during the marriage.
And now for a quick break. This episode of Gavels Down, Voices Up is proudly brought to you by King Law Firm Attorneys at Law Incorporated. We're not just about winning cases, we're about making a difference. Whether it's family law, probate litigation, or standing up against elder abuse, we bring experience, empathy, and excellence to the courtroom. At King Law Firm, we're more than lawyers. We're your team, in your corner, advocating for your rights and making your voice heard. Visit us at thelawyerking.com and on the socials at The Lawyer King to see how we fight with you and for you. King Law Firm Attorneys at Law Incorporated, where your fight becomes our fight. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
Now let's talk about assets. So assets are probably the most fun. Certainly if you have them in a divorce, you want to know where they go, but that's where all the value is. The debt kind of sucks. The assets, the value, that's what we want to divide, and you're entitled to half of it. If it's, at least in California, we're a community property state. So community property means it doesn't really matter what the name of the title is in. You're entitled to half of the property. That means if you bought a house during the marriage, even if it's in husband's name only or wife's name only, you're still entitled to half of it. Separate property is different. Separate property is assets that you came into the marriage with, inheritance, gifts, or things that you created after the date of separation. And those you get 100% of. So when we're talking about the division of assets from a financial or a long-term financial health situation, we want to consider very heavily what the assets are. For example, do we have a lot of depreciating assets? Maybe we have a whole bunch of cars and boats. Do we have a whole bunch of real estate that is maybe a long-term gain but has a cost associated with it right now? Do we have retirement, stocks, bonds? What is it that all of our assets are? Are there collectibles? And then we want to see what is most important and how it's going to affect us long term. I'm going to use a story for this one because I think it really, really is on point. I didn't represent either party, but I once knew of a couple who had a lot. They had a lot of assets. Most of the assets, or I shouldn't say most of it, I would say about a quarter of the assets were cars and boats. They had one boat that was worth a huge amount of money. And then they had a few pieces of real property. And then they had two businesses. The couple decided, no big deal. We'll just go ahead and let each take their own business. And then husband, interestingly, said that he wanted all of the cars and all of the boats. Real car and boat fanatic. So they were like his babies. And as I was watching this unfold, I thought it was so interesting because that was the husband's deal breaker. And wife's over here like, sure, you can have all of that. And she's going to the bank, right? She's getting all of the real estate. That's how this couple ended up dividing their assets, is that they each took their own business. Husband took all of the boats and the cars. Wife took the real property. And when I tell you that one of the boats was very valuable, I mean, one of the boats was really valuable. At the time of the distribution, it was about an equal distribution. Husband's company was worth a little bit more, so it all evened out. And they actually walked away, if we looked at the values in the year of the division, equally. What wasn't thought about, maybe because it was a passion decision, is what's going to happen with those assets. So if we fast forward 5 years, this same couple, wife's living the high life. All of her real estate has appreciated. She's making rental income off of all of them. She's doing very well. In fact, she was doing so well that she decided to retire early so that she could manage and live off the income from the real estate that she was doing. Husband's cars had depreciated. Husband hadn't considered the debt involved in the boat. Boats are very expensive. We don't actually consider them, I think, in the real world, an asset, right? Anybody that's had a boat has said, oh my gosh, you're just hemorrhaging money. husband hadn't considered the fuel, the maintenance, or any of it on the boat or the cars. So over this period of 5 years, the assets had depreciated. Husband was forced to sell these things anyway that he really wanted, but for less money than he probably would have gotten had he sold them at the date of the divorce. Husband was forced to get another job, not just run the company that he'd had, but get another job just to make ends meet. Totally different scenarios, strictly based on how the assets were divided. They could have been divided a completely separate way, and that would have been fine. And it might have provided husband with a little bit more long-term financial stability, long-term post-divorce financial independence. And that's what we're looking for. Financial independence post-divorce. And in that case, yes, they were both gainfully employed. It was fine. But look at how it turned out simply by dividing assets. Another scenario, and this might, touch home to a whole bunch of people that listen, are pensions, specifically our military. Our military are real passionate about their retirement. But pensions and retirement, that could be a 401k, an IRA, a pension with a company, CalSTRS, CalPERS, military retirement, you name it. If it is something that you are earning and will receive at the age of retirement or after you've reached some kind of retirement level, then it's a retirement benefit that I'm going to talk about now. These are super valuable assets, okay? I think they're highly underrated and many people really fight for them. Specifically, military will say, no, I want 100% of my retirement. I know we've been married for 10 years and you're entitled to it, but I want 100%. Or they might say, I know we've only been married 5 years. I might not even retire. So why don't you just waive your right to my retirement? Retirement is treated the same way in California as the other assets. It's an asset. If you contribute to it prior to marriage, then all of your contributions prior to marriage are yours. You get to take them. If you contributed to it during the marriage, then that portion of time that you contributed during the marriage is community property and it's going to be divided equally. That means each spouse has the right to half of it, even if it's not in their name. So sometimes, easy peasy, you each take your own retirements, but I only say do that if they're about equal in value. Why? Because retirements are so valuable, and especially today, it's all about long-term financial health, post-divorce financial stability, financial independence. And one of the best ways to secure your long-term financial independence post-divorce is to maintain your right to receive your share of the retirement. Sure, it might be tempting to say, okay, I'll waive all of my right to the retirement, but I want more cash now. Give me the $50,000 from the house. Give me something extra. Give me spousal support, more spousal support now. But all of that is very short-sighted because the bottom line is that at some point, you're not going to be able to work anymore. And all of that time in the marriage was contributions toward that period where you didn't work anymore or your spouse didn't work anymore, and you have a right to it. There are financial advisors out there that will do some kind of math problem. I'm not a math problem person. I'm not a financial advisor. They can show you about what the value of the retirement plan is. And while it might be worth $100,000 today, so your share would be $50,000, that is not the value that your retirement is going to be when you start collecting it. So when we're talking about how we're dividing assets in a divorce, specifically looking at long-term financial independence, it's really important to consider the kind of asset that you're dividing and how it's going to be done. And my goodness, I don't think waiving retirements is a good idea. I think you should always get what your share of the retirement, even if that means you both split each other's retirements and I take half of his and he takes half of mine, which will be done. They will be formally split and then they'll be smushed back so that I get all of the retirement that I'm entitled to or in my name, all of the retirement that will be in your ex's name, which is exactly what we try and do in a divorce process. So when it comes to assets, not only are you going to look at what they're valued at now, it's a really good idea to look at how those assets are going to be handled in the future. Is the value going to be appreciating? Is it depreciating? Can you afford the cost to maintain or have that asset? And then be realistic on the valuation. I'm just going to say one quick thing, and that is that collectibles are not worth very much. I know that's devastating to hear, but really not many people are paying for your collectibles, nor is your furniture. I know you wanted that couch and you spent a lot of money for that couch and you looked high and low and it was more money than you ever thought you'd ever spend on a couch ever, but It's used now. So it's just not nearly as valuable as it was. So you want to think about some of these when we're talking about how to divide assets from a financial perspective. Back away from the emotions. If there's one or two things that are so emotional for you that you're willing to hold on to them, fine. But remember, gifts and inheritance are not community property. Gifts are a little trickier, but that china set that you got from your mom when grandma died, that's yours. You get to take it. It's yours no matter what. So don't worry about trying to fight over it. Just say, it's mine. And now, the big one, the big ticket item, employment. I'm a woman and I work and I provide a huge amount of financial support to my family. So I might be a little biased. I'm willing to admit that I'm a little biased when it comes to employment, but I am a huge believer in financial independence through employment. Yes, support might be an issue in your divorce case, child support, spousal support, you name it. It might be ordered and it's probably appropriate. However, relying on child support and spousal support, not only is it not typically enough, but it also leaves you under somebody else's control. Are you going to receive it that month? Is the person that's paying going to lose their job or have something that impacts their ability to pay you? Are they going to get remarried and have more children that's going to reduce the amount that's available for you? Is there going to be a new court proceeding that you're going to have to go in and defend your right for this? Are your children going to age out and now child support isn't even a thing no matter what? All of these are considerations. And so the faster that you can get out from under the need for spousal support and child support, the better for you from a long-term financial standpoint. I got it. You might be really upset about everything that happened in the marriage. You might be entitled to it, all of the things, but I'm talking strictly ongoing long-term financial independence here, emotions aside. Every single time I have a client walk into my office that is talking about divorce, I say, what do you do? How much do you make? Sometimes people will think that I'm asking that question so that I can decide whether they can afford me. And actually, that is one consideration. I'm not going to lie, but mostly it's because I need to know what we're dealing with on an ongoing basis, because I know that financials are a hugely important part in any divorce. And if we know how much you're making now or what is going on, then we can decide better. Can you afford the debt that's associated with the asset? How are we going to be dividing assets and what kind of support is going on? So how much do you make? When somebody says that they're unemployed, they had a stay-at-home parent situation or a stay-at-home spouse situation, the first thing I say is you need to go get a job. Doesn't matter what it is. You can go get a minimum wage job, but you need to go get a job. You need to do something so that you are getting control of your own unique financial situation and you're no longer reliant on your ex. It's going to be your ex who wants to be reliant on somebody that doesn't want to be in a relationship with, or they have no obligation to be involved in. I know it's a sticky subject. Many people don't like it. There's probably a lot of pushback on that. Go get a job. And here's the thing. Courts, they are going to make decisions about ongoing support based on the work. If you don't have a full-time minimum wage job, but the court really can't find a reason not to have you have that job, they're going to impute you at the full-time minimum wage anyway. They can't go force you to go to work, right? But they can say, well, you should. We think you should be working, so your decision not to work is voluntary. For the purposes of calculating support, we're going to assume that you are bringing in X amount of dollars. That's called imputation, and they do it all the time. If you're going to be imputed at the full-time minimum wage job, you might as well be earning the full-time minimum wage income. And the sooner, the better. Because there's another part of divorce, and that's the debts that we already talked about that you're going to be on the hook for. And it's that there is a certain amount of time that the court is going to allow support to go on for. And after that, it is up to you to support yourself. So the sooner that we can get on a trajectory to be self-supporting, the better. Employment. And it is so overwhelming depending on where you are in your divorce process. Sometimes I have people that say, I haven't worked in 20 years. I have no skills. You do have skills. Maybe you can only get your foot in the door with a minimum wage job. That's okay for now. Start there and work your way up. Maybe you don't even have those skills and you're like, oh, I need to go to school to get a career. That's okay. Do that. Get on track to become self-supporting and get on a career path or a job earning path that is going to allow you to provide for yourself. And if you were the income earner, oh my gosh, please hear me now. Do not try and get out of your job, quit your job, or earn less money strictly to get out of paying child support or spousal support. Courts see through it. It doesn't often work. I won't say never because I don't like absolutes and I've seen it go through a few times, but it's not a good plan for how to handle your employment through a divorce process. If I had 3 things I would tell somebody about employment when they're going through a divorce, it's make sure you are employed. Make sure that you are on a trajectory to earn more money. So is that advancing your career by promotion? Is it getting some new certification, going to school, changing careers completely? What are you doing to earn more money? Put away all the thoughts that more money equal more support. That is not what we're looking at. We're looking at long-term post-divorce financial independence for you. And if you're making more money, you're more likely to be financially independent and secure. And 3, consider your employment and how much money you can realistically make or earn as you are considering the other issues within your divorce. Where are you going to live? What assets are you going to hold on to? What debts do you think you need to cover? Or should we get rid of some of these debts because on a monthly reoccurring basis, you simply don't have the cash flow from income to achieve? These are real questions that really need to be answered. And if you are brave enough to face them head on as early in your divorce process as possible, I assure you, you are more likely to be financially independent, financially healthy, and have a really great post-divorce financial future. Your financial independence really directly relates to how you handle it and what steps you take. So if you are concerned or you don't really understand what decisions you should be making, how much can you afford? What debts should you take? What assets are more valuable? Reach out to the powers that be, find help because there is a wealth of information out there. If you or somebody you know has successfully navigated divorce, and I'd be so interested to hear about people that have been financially better off post-divorce than they were in the marriage, I would love to hear it. I'm Rachel King at The Lawyer King. Gavels Down, Voices Up. Until next time. Thanks for tuning in to Gavels Down, Voices Up. Like what you heard? Then don't just sit there. Subscribe, share, and tell me your thoughts. I'm Rachel King, bringing not just my opinions to the mic, but about the courtroom too. Your part, keep listening, keep engaging, and until next time, let's keep those gavels down and our voices up. Unmistakably up.